Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the show, everybody. You may notice that I am starting this episode instead of Kim, which has been a little unusual this season, but there is a really significant reason why. We have an amazing guest today that Kim is going to introduce.
It's so true. So this guy sitting right next to me, if you're watching the video, it's my son, Henry. He, you know what he just did? It's really cool. So we're like late December, right? He just finished his senior year of high school a little bit early. And so my sweet baby is done with high school. It's the weirdest thing ever. Isn't it so weird?
It is kind of weird. It is a little weird. I'll be honest. I don't know what to do with myself.
He kind of doesn't know what to do with himself. So today he was delivering me to the office so that I could do the podcast. And he said he wanted to stick around. I was like, do you want to be on the podcast? And he's like, yeah, I'll do the podcast. I was like, terrific. Let's do this. So
Amazing.
Henry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's been pretty good. I've heard a lot about it and it seems pretty good. So I'm excited to be on it.
That's awesome. Have you actually ever listened to any episodes?
I don't know. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
I haven't.
not.
I haven't even thought about it. Like I haven't thought about listening. Not I haven't thought about the podcast. It's just It's not something I usually listen to, and I don't really think to check it. But I'm excited to be here. Nonetheless,
We were talking beforehand about how you don't really listen to a lot of long form content.
I don't. I really don't. I turn something on for 20 minutes in the car, and then I'll probably turn it off anyway. So
Yeah,
nothing too crazy.
that makes sense. So what you're saying is we got to get better at our short form content.
Yeah, you guys, honestly, if I'm not even joking with you guys, you should start doing this whole TikTok, YouTube short stuff. I mean, that's how I get turned on to any podcast I've ever listened to.
That's awesome.
Ever. Because it's always through scrolling.
We do post once in a while some stuff, but I think we need to get better at how we do it.
Well, it kind of sucks if I'll be honest with you. It sucks because it takes away from the long form, you have to put a lot of effort into this short form stuff to get people to watch the long form.
Right.
I think that's just a testament to people's attention span these days and addiction to scrolling, which I'm guilty of too. That's not pointing fingers or anything.
Yeah.
But I wish, people would just, myself included, I wish I would just watch a damn podcast. You know what I mean?
Well, now you get to be on one.
Yep.
Exactly.
I wonder if you'll watch this one.
I don't
I
know.
would. I mean, there's no reason to watch this one. You're on it, right?
I know. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Awesome. Okay, Henry, I want to ask you the question that we ask all of our guests when they come on our show.
Okay.
If somebody was talking about you behind your back, how would you want them to talk about you?
Handsome, good looking, amazing with women, and really charming. Millionaire too, if I was just choosing. No, I'm just joking. I would really like people to say that I'm genuine. I think authenticity and being genuine is important. And yeah, that's maybe it. Maybe funny. I like being funny. I like making people laugh. But yeah, that's about it. I really like that opening question. That's a good one.
Being funny can be a good way to charm the ladies.
You're telling me, brother. You're telling me.
That's amazing. Kim, what do you think about that? Is that how you would describe Henry behind his back?
Yes, but there would be more. I don't know that I would say that he's funny, though he has a great sense of humor.
I'm curious. This is genuine. I don't know the difference. Like, what do you like? What does that mean? Sorry.
Like, do you do things that make other people laugh a lot?
Yeah.
That would be being funny.
I think so.
But to find humor in things is kind of having a good sense of humor, wouldn't you say? It's kind of the difference between being funny and having a good sense of humor.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point.
But he's funny. He gets that from his mom. And it's a recessive gene, but he also has red hair. So here we are. I think, yes, those are all things. He's a kid who, I mean, he's almost an adult, but I'll call him, oh my gosh, look, he's a kid who from the time he could walk and talk, people would call him an old soul. He's always been someone who kind of has a little more depth and can really dive into more philosophical thinking and deeper thoughts. And he asks good questions. And he just, I think that's a great way to describe him. He's kind of an old soul, and he just always has been. He's always been, like, as a 2-year-old, he was having conversations. His first grade teacher, the only teacher that ever gave like criticism with him, her biggest qualm was that he speaks too much like an adult, and she winds up getting in arguments with him.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I that's true, I guess. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but that is something I would like. I think old soul is pretty accurate. I feel like that's something that I can see throughout my daily life.
I also think you're a free thinker.
Yeah.
He's like constantly asking questions and mulling things over, and will come back with new questions on the same topic. And he's really good at listening to understand. And that is a trait that I think is kind of few and far between these days.
I appreciate that. That's something that means a lot, actually. I really do try and ask a lot of questions, just because I feel like, especially when it comes to things that I disagree with, I come to find that it's easier to rationalize with someone if you ask them questions to understand, as opposed to, like she said, trying to just talk back at them. It doesn't really do much. So that is something I appreciate.
The very first time that my wife met you, I want to say it was at Pizza Ranch, maybe.
Yeah, I think that was. I'm pretty sure that was. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we left, she said, well, I wish that I would have gotten to meet like some of the other people. Like, we were in a small room that was really long. And so if you weren't sitting beside or across from someone, it was really hard to have a conversation. But she was like, but I got to talk to Henry a lot, and he asked such good questions. Like she felt genuinely like you were interested in who she was and what she was doing. And like, I think that's been my experience with you. Anytime you're around people, is like, you're genuinely curious about what makes them tick. And it's just like, we hopped on today, and before we started recording, you just started asking me questions like, hey, what do you think about South Africa? What's the politics like? Are you going to have kids? Like, just like immediately going into like really, and not just surface level, like, oh, what'd you do today? Like, it's like actually meaningful questions. So I think that's great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot. Coming from both of you.
Maybe you have a podcaster within you.
Maybe so. Maybe I'll be on here a lot more.
Maybe you should have your own show.
I don't know what I'd ever talk about. I don't know. I feel like that.
Actually, I just wrote this down while we were talking about how good you are at asking questions. I wrote down, if you could do a podcast of your own, what do you think you would talk about?
I would like to just talk about a plethora of things. I feel like I have a lot of diverse interests. I mean, I like to fish and go to jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? They're on the opposite end of the spectrum. So I feel like I'd like to just, I don't know. I'd like to do something similar, maybe to like with Theo Vaughn we were talking about. I like when he just sits down and kind of talks to the camera about just things in general. He has a couple episodes where he does that. Or I really like when Joe Rogan does that. He talks to other people, but he also incorporates a lot of his experience into those things. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to do something, maybe a mix of that. I mean, those are the people I watch the most and respect the most in the podcasting game. So I'd probably do something like that.
Yeah. I think you would be really good at that, because I think no matter what the topic is, you could probably like be interested enough to make compelling content.
Oh, I hope so, man. That's like the whole point,
I was listening to a clip from Gary V yesterday. And he said, if you're not interested in what you're doing, then there's no point in doing it, because somebody else will be interested and they'll do it 10 times better than you would. And I think what you could do as good or better than anyone is be interested in whatever your guest was come to talk about.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Just talking to people, I like to talk to people in general. So it'd be good to talk about that stuff, I don't know how I would get in contact with people whom I don't know, talking to someone like LA or something crazy, but that'd be pretty cool. I would enjoy that.
I'll tell you how you get in contact with people you don't know. You just reach out.
That is a good point. I mean, we have the most modes of access to that now than pretty much ever. I mean, you can DM them, email them, whatever.
Right.
You
So
probably even
this
text them.
year on the podcast, we decided to start interviewing guests, and I think we knew 3 of them beforehand.
Okay. So can I ask you guys something about that? I think
Yeah.
I've asked my mom before, but I'll be honest, I don't remember her answer. Who was your favorite interview? Like, who gave the best interview for you guys personally? Just who did you enjoy talking to the most?
We just asked each other this question a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh.
This interview is quickly going to higher on my list. So
Oh, boom, man. That's exactly what I want to hear.
Kim, do you have your answer like off the top of your head?
Yeah.
I remember what you said when you
Yeah, it's the same answer I gave you the other day. It was this guy named Derek. He goes by Truth Seeker on all of the media platforms and stuff. He was just super genuine. And he had some pushback, just kind of some people coming against him. Right before he was on our show, and he was just like, if you don't want to interview me, like if you don't want bad press, like I understand, I don't want to hurt your show in any way, which made me want to interview him more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, it's like, heck no, I don't really care what anybody else says. Like, let's hear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know, I really valued that one.
I think that's something that I really value as well. Someone being real, like I said, authentic and genuine is really important to me. I feel like.
Yeah, I think he definitely was that, and he's a really fun person. You should follow him on social media. Just like the stuff he posts is like super. I don't always want to say it's super like fringe, because it's not always, but like the most recent thing that he posted, which I like saved to watch later, was about a guy who his story is being abducted by aliens like in the 70s. And so it's like, just interesting things. And then sometimes it won't be quite so mystical or strange, but like he's just a really fun person to listen to.
Yeah.
I think my answer, it's tough because there's a few of them that I think back and I'm like, man, I really enjoyed these. Like, I think one of the things that's been the most surprising to me is just the amount of people that we didn't know and didn't have relationship with who've been like totally willing to hop on. Like, I think Trusik is a great example of that. Like, we had no prior relationship with him, and I reached out to him on like, I think Facebook Messenger or something like that. And he responded like within a few hours, and we had a time scheduled within a day. And it was like, wow, like that's amazing that you would be willing to do that. And we've had that happen with a few people where it's just like they totally opened up and created relationship where I didn't even expect anything from them. But I don't know if I had to pick a favorite, like that's still really hard. I do really enjoy our episode that we did with Nancy Cohen.
Oh yeah, I remember my mom talking to me about that one.
Yeah, that kind of like shifted the direction. Like, she was one of the first guests, maybe the third guest that we interviewed ever on the podcast. And so that was really fun. But also one of our most recent ones was with an author who's written several books. One of them's become a movie. And it was just truthfully a genuine person who showed up and just had a conversation with us.
Yeah.
And that was really amazing too.
You guys been talking about this guy a whole bunch. I gotta go listen to that podcast, at least one of them. Because from what I've heard from you guys, he seems really genuine and had some good stuff to say. So
super nice guy.
Something interesting to hear.
You want to know something funny about the podcast? And our guests? I was thinking, I wonder who is my least favorite. And I don't think I had any where I felt like we were scraping by or like just had to get through it. Like, not a single one. They were all great.
Yeah.
Like, there aren't negatives. I don't think there were any.
Yeah.
That I was just like, whoa, wow.
Glad that's over.
We
No.
made it.
Yeah.
I think every single one of them is like, oh, I hope they want to be our friend. I would
Mhm.
love it if they came on again.
Yeah.
That's always
Hmm.
good. That's nice to hear.
Mhm.
Okay, Henry, I have another question for you. So you mentioned a little bit about like short form content and just like uh maybe your generation really enjoying that style of content better than long form content. If there's anything that you wish the older generation understood better about your generation, what would that be?
Gosh, good question.
That is a good question. Let me take a minute to think. I don't know. I would say probably.
Like, do you ever feel misunderstood by older generations? I know
can't
we've
say I
talked
do.
about you being an old soul, so maybe you associate more with older generations, but like, are there things where you're like, man, like I see potential or something here that they don't understand, and so it seems foolish to them?
I wish a lot of older people and younger people, like just in general, but for this question, I wish a lot of people put themselves in our shoes more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, think about a time when we've had this access to technology ever in human history, like at all, ever, or
Yeah.
access to certain things that has never been able to be that access to this extent. And so I
Mhm.
think for that, I wish people would understand like a lot more of maybe not the difficulty, but maybe the more nuance of being, I guess, my generation and trying to grow up in that. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I kind of feel like
Yeah.
I'm rambling there, but I feel like that's something everybody could do. You know, I think it'd be important. I think it's just important to put yourself in other people's shoes in
Mhm.
general. But that's what I would say.
Yeah. Was there like so something I'm thinking about with like a conversation I had with Bree at lunch was we were recently with some of her family for Christmas, and her nephew's really into collecting Pokemon cards.
Uh huh.
And it's like she was posing the question to me, like, do you think that's because the parents' generation like grew up with Pokemon, and so they want to like share that with their kids, but then the generations above that are like, why are you collecting that? And like I look at it as sort of like baseball cards, like, my parents and maybe even like more so my older brother or something like would collect baseball cards a lot, and there's no like uh extrinsic value to it, but it has value to you.
Yeah.
Like it's valuable because you like it. And I'm just wondering, like, are there things like that for you where you see value that other people don't?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you said is very true in that I think it does have something to do with the parents. I mean, a perfect example of that is Pokemon. My mom was never really into it, I don't think. I mean, maybe you were a little bit,
Nope.
but not enough
Zero.
to really show me anything when I was a kid. My dad never really was either. And so I saw a lot of that growing up, and I agree with that I think it is something your parents are interested in it, so you're kind of interested in it. And I have to say that is very true with things in my life that I hold very dear to me, like fishing. I really
Mm.
enjoy fishing. I fished with my dad a lot when I first started, and my dad's someone who I very much value. I value the relationship I have with him, and so I think a lot of people look at it as like boring or uninteresting. But I think for me, it is that relationship, and more so maybe I enjoy it because of that, because of what I remember of that. You know what I mean? You remember
Mhm.
more of the fun times than the sitting out when it's cold and you don't catch any fish times. You know what I mean? You remember
Yeah.
having a conversation or hanging out or whatever. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for
So I think
sure.
there is something there for sure.
Do you think fishing is part of like your old soul, or or are there a lot of kids in your generation that love fishing?
That's hard to say. And that goes back to my last statement in that I see a lot of content online of people my age doing that. But
Mm.
in reality, in my experience, like at school, it's a pretty small population, but also, or small population of people who fish. Obviously, I go to East, it's a
Yeah.
very large school, but I think that I think it is fairly rare. And I think it has to do with where we're at too. If I was in a smaller town, I bet there'd be a lot more people who do it, but I don't
Mhm.
think it's the case here. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm gonna switch directions unless Kim, you have some more in that line.
Oh, good.
Okay, so the this podcast name is Market Mystics. We've talked about investing. We've talked about the relationship with the Father that we have, and so I'm curious. Like, you've grown up with some spiritual influences that are a little bit different than maybe some of your peers have.
Yeah.
What what is like hearing from God or connecting with God or creation? What's that like for you? What does that look like for you?
I have to say that it's probably not as commonplace as it was when I was younger. Just because I haven't made the time for it, if I can be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something everybody does, but it's something I can say I haven't done. But for me, I notice a lot. I don't know if there's a connection per se, but I see the Father in a lot of things and a lot of media, things like that. Uh, like it's weird. I'll be watching a TV show and I'll be like, this is about something from the Bible. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Or this has heavy influences from God. And I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the content I consume that's more, I guess you would say fictional or fantasy. Like, I really enjoy Star Wars. I'm a big nerd about that. And I see the Father a lot in that. I see a lot of stories from the Bible, a lot of stuff like that. You know what I mean? I think it's really interesting, the amount that God is involved in everybody's lives. And I think it's something that if you just take a step back from and like, hey, this is kind of in here, these elements are there. I think it'd be really easy to see for a lot more people. You know what I mean? A lot more, what's it called? Visible, I guess.
yeah. Kim, what do you think it's been like raising Henry in that? Like in your walk. We've talked a lot about, your individual walk and just sort of your journey. What's it been like raising a child while on that journey?
That's a good question. Henry actually was probably one of the biggest catalysts for me actually growing in my walk with the Lord. When I had gotten back into church when I was in my, I don't know, maybe late 20s. So he was young, like 5, 6, 7. We would pray at night. I'm doing the things that you're supposed to do as a parent, right? And we would pray at night, or we would say the memory verse of the week from Sunday school or whatever. And he stretched me more than anyone had ever stretched me before, more than any pastor had that preached on Sunday, more than any small group leader, more than any personal mentor. Because at night he would want to pray for Satan. And I'm like, Henry, why would you want to do that? He is our enemy. And he's like, but God says, love your enemies, and God is love. So why wouldn't we pray for Satan? It was just like one of these things that as a parent, I'm like trying to explain, but I don't actually know. And so then as a parent, I want to figure this out. You know what I mean? And it really pushed me into expanding how I know the Father. And you're right. He does say love your enemies, and he is love. So why would he not also love Satan? You know what I mean? And not, I don't know. It is a very interesting thing. So I think it's been an interesting relationship spiritually between us growing up, because he has stretched me, but I also think I've stretched him.
I was just gonna say that I have really in-depth talks with my mom about things that we just think in general. A couple years ago, she had a lot of conviction about Christmas and where it came from, why it was there. I'm sure you guys have talked about it. I mean, it's pretty common, or common knowledge rather. And it was something I always thought about, and it really led me to challenge my beliefs. Because she's a lot more mature than me in the spirit, just in general, and I'm fine with saying that. I think that she's miles ahead of me in that area. And I think a lot of what she has said has really brought me closer with the Lord, and had me asking more questions. Whereas before, I think it would have been more like religious in that, we do this because we're supposed to, you know what I mean? Instead of really knowing the reasoning behind it, and asking for myself, I think that's really important as well. That's just as important as knowing why we do things is to know, like on a personal level with the Lord, why you have to do this. Because everybody's different. Everybody has a different calling. Everybody has a different place in heaven. And so I think that led me to really mature in that area. I mean, there's still a lot to go. Don't get me wrong, but yeah.
Yeah. So when this episode's released, it'll be like 3 days after Christmas.
Okay.
So what is that like? What is Christmas like for you now? Because you talked about going through that journey with your mom, and she's talked about it a little bit about how, it used to be a big thing and then went through a few years where it wasn't at all a thing. And now it's like, there's elements of it coming back either fully or partially. Like, when you think about Christmas, how do you look at it?
When I think about Christmas, I really have no conviction over it. I know she did for a long time, but that wasn't something I ever really had. But I did it a lot out of respect for her because I know she has respect for the Lord. So obviously, she's going in the right direction. I can't imagine she would do something without the Lord's, stamp of approval, I guess. But for a long time it was, or not for a long time, for a couple years, it was, we can't do Christmas. It's Hanukkah. And then that kind of morphed into a half Hanukkah, half Christmas. We would do like a Hanukkah bush that we'd still decorate. You know what I mean?
It was that plant right there, just over his shoulder.
And I had no conviction. I didn't really care much. I did what she wanted. I think that's fine. I was never upset to lose Christmas. But I think a big part of Christmas for us for a while was religion. And I think that what the Lord really wanted to do, and this could be wrong, but I think he was trying to just get the religion out of it. Every year we would have to, say the verses, do this because we have to do this, like I said, as opposed to really understanding why we do this, what the purpose is, you know what I mean? And how it's effective in the heavenlies. I think that was a big reason for the shift. And I think it was a good one. I'm happy where I'm at now. I was happy back then. She knows what she's doing. You know what I mean?
What does that look like for you now?
Well, it's kind of weird. At my dad's house, we still do normal Christmas. They're divorced, just so everybody knows, my dad and my mother, but
we're actually both married, just not to each other.
Yeah, right. There you go. So they do Christmas, which I have no qualms with. It makes no difference to me. But it is a weird thing. I'll be honest with you. When they do Halloween, I don't like it at all. It's always been weird for that since we stopped doing it. Because I don't know, it feels weird. It's a conviction thing I have. It's probably from the Lord, but it's something I don't really like. But for Christmas over here, like this year, we're just doing a normal Christmas. We got the tree up. We'll do normal presents. And I think I can't speak for my mom, but from what she's told me, it's sort of what I said earlier in that, the Lord is okay with us doing this now because we know the origins of it and we understand, why we do things, why we don't do things, as opposed to just not doing it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Yesterday, Bree and I went for a walk and we were talking about Christmas and just how just some of the different aspects of it. And I told her, a couple years ago, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I watched this really long series on YouTube where a lady looked at every single element of Christmas and attempted to talk about the roots of it and whether or not it came from like Christianity or a biblical tradition, or whether or not it was adopted from some other religious tradition. And it's sort of like, it was really interesting to learn some of it. And it made me at the time, like, I don't want to say, kind of anti-Christmas for a moment. But I was telling Bree that out of I've sort of come back into I think the best way to describe it is I enjoy Christmas for what it is. I don't try to make it what it's not. And I think sometimes religion tries to make it what it's not.
Yep.
But one of the things that stuck with me from that YouTube series that I watched was this concept of I think they called it like Keen for a Day or something. And it was this tradition in, I don't know when, but an old tradition where if someone was going to be executed, uh, they, they would let them for a day pretend to be Keen. So they got to eat at the Keen's table and, um, not necessarily like make rules and do things like that, but they like got to celebrate, like be be the master for a day. And what that caused was a lot of chaos because they didn't know what they were doing. They were just like crazy. And so this lady was drawing comparisons between that and sometimes at Christmas when you make the entire event about the kids and about the gifts, you flip the kingdom upside down to where the kids are running the kingdom instead of just being there. And that's probably the thing that like stuck with me the most through that, was because I realized like no matter how you choose to celebrate, like having things ordered is important. And so
Yeah.
not allowing like kids to be in charge and every decision of that be based around how do we make the kids happy. Like I think that's kind of an important like aspect. And not that you can't give gifts. Like I'm not against giving gifts or receiving gifts for that matter. Like,
Hint,
you know,
hint.
if any of our listeners want to drop some, just kidding. But yeah, I just think that it's important to like have it be rightly ordered so that like you know what it is you're celebrating and make it make it intentional. One thing I really don't like is people who do things, or I don't want to say people who do things. I don't like myself doing things out of just, well, that's the way we've always done it. Like I want to understand why that's how we've done it, and is that how I want to continue doing it?
Yeah.
That's a good perspective, Josh, because I was just thinking right before you explained it, like there's kind of a fine line between tradition and religion, right? Like this is what we do, and we do it because this is what we've always done. Don't question it. That's kind of religion.
Right.
And tradition is very similar, right? This is what we do because this is how we've always done it, right? But it almost it makes me think that it is the heart behind it.
Yeah.
Is kind of the difference. Like for us, when we re-implemented Christmas, so much of that has to do with just traditions. Like we just have family traditions that we do around Christmas time. Like setting up the tree is always a thing. What do we do?
Yep. We drink hot chocolate, listen to music, and set up the tree. We take like a night to just do that.
Right. Christmas Eve, there's certain things we do. We do this big tea party with the family, and everybody gets really dressed up and as fancy as possible. And we eat our crumpets and drink our tea. And I mean, it's silly, but it's what we do. And then we go drive around and look at Christmas lights. But it's tradition.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But if at any point it becomes, we have to do this because it's what we've always done, and there's no like input and there's no like heartfelt anything behind it, I hope we stop. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's important. I do.
You think we'll be able to recognize the line?
I think it'll be difficult because I mean nobody sets out and is like, okay, I'm always going to do this forever. You know, like religious people never went out and were like, I'm going to try and be religious today. Obviously, that wouldn't make any sense. I think that the farther away you get from why you're doing it, without being refreshed, like sort of like when we were doing Christmas, it was like we'd always read these lines from the Bible. But why did we do that? We didn't really know. We just kind of kept going. You know what I mean? I think it's the same. If we just keep doing it without,
it's because it's what you do
without purpose. Yeah.
Right.
Then of course you'll delve into religion as opposed to authentic tradition, you know?
Yeah.
But I think that's possible with anything, you know, getting up in the morning sometimes can be that way. You know what I mean? I think that can happen anytime with anything.
That's true.
I mean, I think humans are patternistic beings. We like to have our patterns. We like to follow those. We like order, at least in some capacity, you know? So I think that without purpose, we become religious and we become more away from like what it is we're doing and why we're doing it.
It's true. You know what? I was just thinking when you were talking about this, Henry, I was thinking, you know what I think the real difference is? Relationship. Because I think in religion, it takes the relationship out of it.
Yeah.
And in tradition, it needs to be based around relationship. So I would just say this. I would hope that you'll hold me accountable and vice versa.
Yeah.
That if any of these traditions become religious and it's not about the relationship anymore, it's just about doing the thing because that's what we do, then, I mean, call me out.
Right. Yeah.
He's respectful. I can say this to my son because he's a respectful guy. Like,
try to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Josh?
Yeah, I think that like where it comes from makes all the difference. Because even religious traditions, like I don't think they're all bad. I think sometimes we just do them because that's what our parents did and our grandparents did and their grandparents did, and we don't actually understand why we do them. I think if you understand why you do them and then you say, yeah, actually that is what I want to do, like
Right.
I think that's great. I really think it just comes from your heart of like, do you understand like what it is? What is it about like taking a night and drinking hot chocolate and decorating the tree? Is it do you do it just because that's what you've always done, or do you do it because wow, this actually like really brings this closeness and lightheartedness to our family, and it's fun. Like I think you can do the same thing from a different place and it has like different meaning. And so yeah, when I look at Christmas or things like that, like our family a couple years ago, I don't even exactly know how this started. I want to say it was probably an accident, but on Christmas Eve we put our pajamas on, drink hot chocolate, and watch the Polar Express. And then after we watch the Polar Express, the kids get to open one present, and that just sort of like became a thing we did. And I don't know how it ended up being that movie. Like I almost want to say that someone hadn't watched it, so we just picked it, and then the next year we watched it again, and then the next year we watched it again, and now it's like in the family chat, like, oh, make sure you bring your pajamas so we can watch the Polar Express. Like,
I agree with that. I feel like that's kind of how our tea party got started on Christmas Eve. Similarly,
yeah,
I feel like there was a time where we drank a lot of tea, like just in general. It's kind of weird. We would just sit down and have like, there was a period of time when I was in like 7th or 8th grade where like almost every day, almost every week, I guess for sure. We'd sit down and have tea after school and after everybody got home from work, and we just get to find China out and make tea, sit down and talk about the day. You know what I mean? And I think that just evolved one year. We did the same thing over Christmas Eve. We were just having that. And then it kind of turned into what we have today, where we just get dressed up and make food. And you know what I mean? I think it's evolved into that. But I think a lot of that comes from trying to get that genuine, authentic relationship that you have with your family. Because it's really easy to get caught up in the like, every day I come home and go to my room and watch TV or something, you know what I mean? But when you actually take the time to sit down and have relation with your family and ask genuinely, how are you doing? How are you? How's your day? How is everything? You know what I mean? It's important.
Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, so I have another question for you. You just finished high school, and normally, like, I don't want to say normally, oftentimes when you finish high school, I felt this like almost like I have to know what I'm going to do. I have to know what my life's going to look like. And there was like I took a year off in between high school and college because I really didn't know the answer to that. But for about as long as I've known you, you've known what you want to do. And so I'm just curious, like, okay, so now you're done with high school. We talked about you're going to start taking some college classes. But what does, at this point, knowing that it could change at any moment, what do you want the next 5 years, 10 years to look like for you?
In 5 years, I want to be out of college and in the Marine Corps as an officer. That's the plan right now. But that is so subject to change. Like you just said, I mean, 3 months ago, I was just going to go straight into the Marine Corps right after high school. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
very subject to change. maybe there's a baddie that I find that really wants to get with me. And so I'll just have to say no on the Marine Corps thing. You know what I mean? But in 10 years, I'd like to either still be in the Marine Corps. My thing is, the way I'm thinking is, if I re-enlist in the Marine Corps once, I'm just going to do it until I fully retire.
Mhm.
And then if I don't re-enlist, I'll get out and I'll probably I'd really like to go to trade school. I found that I really enjoy working with my hands and carpentry in my carpentry class. And I worked with Jason over the summer. That's my stepdad, for I guess people who don't know.
The Podfather.
Yes, right. And we built tables and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process. And so I'd like to get into something like that. I like being able to see what I built with my own hands as opposed to like seeing what I built on a computer screen or something. You know what I mean? Which,
Mhm.
not dogging it at all. There's tons of people out there who are super talented. It's just not me. You know what I mean? As of late, I've found it difficult to sit down and say, yeah, I really want to sit at a desk for a long time and make money that way. So I think for me right now, it's after the Marine Corps, if that does happen, I'll find a trade that I like and hopefully eventually own my own business. That's the end goal. Own my own business, doing something into trades.
So in your like as you start taking college classes, do you have a degree in mind to put you in position for that? Or is there like
I'm
what is
taking
your thought with it?
I'm taking business classes right now just because I'm not familiar with the world of business. That's something I have really no idea how it goes, what it is. And so I'd like to get some knowledge on that. Uh, I don't really have anything for the trades because you can't really. The plan right now is basically to just get a degree to go into the Marine Corps as an
Mhm.
officer. That's the plan right now. So the degree to me doesn't terribly matter as long as I get that end goal. And then after that is when I'll sit down and be like, well, do I want to do plumbing? Do I want to be an electrician? Do I want to do masonry? You know what I mean? That's when I'll sit down and really think, what do I like? What have I come to enjoy over the years? And that's what I'll probably try and do.
Yeah. So you've talked a few times about the Marines. What and from probably as long as I've known you, you've talked about that.
Yeah.
What is it about that it draws you to it?
Couple of things. Like I said, I have a really close relationship with my dad. I consider him to be one of my best friends. He was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, I think. He would know more than me. 4, yeah. That's where he met my mom. And also, I'd really like to get out and see the world. I'd like to get out and do stuff with myself. I don't want to be in Kansas. If I'm still in Kansas in 5 years, I want to get hit really hard. I don't want to be here for my whole life without ever experiencing anything else.
Yeah.
At least in a capacity of living there for some period of time. And so for me, I see that as the main. I don't want to say escape because I don't dislike it here,
Mhm.
and I could very well see myself coming back. But I don't want to be here forever. You know what I mean? I want to be able to say, oh yeah, I went and lived in Thailand for 2 months. You know what I mean? I feel like that'd be cool to be able to say and
Yeah.
give me experience on the world. You know what I mean?
I
So
think
that's a main draw.
one of the best things someone could do with their life is travel and experience the world because it'll give you a perspective that a lot of your peers may not ever have.
Yeah, and I agree with that a lot. In my philosophy class last year, there was a philosopher, John Locke, who said experiences are what make a man. And I completely agree with that. I think if you really, really want to be confident in who you are and what you stand for and have values that you'll die on, I think you really need to have experience in those and be able to say and point to these events and say, hey, I know this is who I am because of X. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I have some of those things, but I'd like to get more. Obviously, you can never have too much.
Hmm.
Good answer, Henry. You make a proud mama.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just watching your mom's reaction to your questions, and every once in a while she just gets this like, oh, he's a good one. That's
True.
amazing.
I get it all the time.
I appreciate it.
Before we wrap up today, Henry, I want to know, are there questions you have for us? Like what's like you just hopped on here willingly, like out of free time, like, but is there things that like you're curious about or like things you've always wanted to ask your mom and now she's on a microphone where she has to answer? Like, I
We'll ask
don't
both
know.
of you for as long as you've known each other, I feel like you guys have been through a lot. I mean, you guys started a business, You go to South Africa pretty consistent. I mean, not consistently date wise, but you go, you guys are there a lot. So I'd like to ask, what's the, like, can you point to a time when it was like, man, this was the best thing that ever happened with me and Josh? And what's the worst thing that ever happened with you and Josh? Like, what's the highs and lows, I guess? Because I don't really know my mother from any perspective other than my mother. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, she is my mom.
She's my mom.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. So I'd like to, I don't know, I'd like to hear perspective on that. And I'd like to get to know
Sure.
you a little bit better in that capacity, Josh.
I mean, I can answer. I think one of the best times that we've had, you and me, Josh, was when we spent that month in South Africa. I think I got to know you so much better. Not that we didn't know each other before, because we did, but I mean, when you're spending every day with somebody, I think we really like spiritually got to know each other more, kind of figured out some weird character quirks too. You know what I mean? Like I can now figure out when he's uncomfortable in a room. You know what I mean?
That's
And
fair.
by the end of the trip, if something funny was going on, you could just kind of look across the room and be like, oh, yep.
Yeah.
There's that communication that just happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, and I think we both really grew on that trip personally, like within ourselves and with the Lord. And there's something special about kind of being unabashedly on that journey at the same time.
I see.
What's your answer for like the worst or hardest?
It doesn't even have to be worse. I was just thinking like a difficult experience or something,
Yeah.
that you both had to kind of brave through together.
While you're thinking about that, I'll share my like the best. I think one of the best things we did was start this podcast. Because yeah, I didn't necessarily really want to start it when we started it. I felt like the Lord was leading us to start it, but like being a podcaster wasn't really something that like I really desired to do. But being faithful in doing that has opened up a lot of doors and opportunities and has helped me grow, because if nothing else, like when you sit down to record twice a week, like if you have nothing to talk about, then it's going to be a really boring episode. And I'm sure there have been some episodes that were pretty boring, but it's like, I think it has helped me be better in conversation. I've always been more of an introverted person and not, like I don't often just go seek out conversation with people, but I think the moments of this podcast have helped me be more comfortable doing that and having conversation with strangers, and like keeping me motivated to keep my personal growth on track, so that then there is there is something to talk about. It's not just like, oh well, last month I was doing this and this month I'm doing the same thing. No, like I want to be growing, and I want to continue my relationship with the Lord so that I can talk about something.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the worst thing, Josh?
I think we've learned lessons in business, like how to do business better, or things like I think about when we very first started the business before the podcast was the thing. We had this physical space and we spent some money and time remodeling it, and it was great, but we didn't have the business to support it. And then we ended up there was a whole group of us that were sharing a building, and the whole group of us moved out of the building. And so like then the time and money that we invested into that space sort of just, I don't want to say was wasted, but in some essence, like the reward was reaped by somebody else.
Yeah, that is true. I helped remodel that. I helped lay the floor in there, and it was really cool. I remember looking at it. I was just telling her this the other day. I was like, yeah, that building was super nice. Like after we finished it, it was a great space. And it's like, oh, well, 2 months later, no more. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah. Yeah. So I think that was one of the more challenging things because it was like, I think sometimes when you start a business, like you get really excited and you're like, okay, we got to do this, and we got to do this, and we got to do this. And these are the things you do when you have a business. And it really wasn't necessary for what we were doing. And um, I think that was a challenging like time. And so like now, like we still have the business and we're still sort of learning to how to mold that into what we want it to be. But now we do it remotely on Zoom from our homes, and
Right.
it's it looks totally different. And so I think, yeah, that would be one of probably, if I think back, like one of the more challenging things that I learned through our business partnership.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I think that was an interesting time. I don't know. I obviously wasn't there with you guys. You guys had a more connected relationship than I had with you as a group, but I do think that that was a difficult time, especially because it's like, you put all this work in. I remember we were working hard at that. I remember laying floors with you and
Yeah.
Wayne, but yeah, that sucked when we had to leave there. I was disappointed and I wasn't even part of the business.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a beautiful space. I think some of the hardest stuff for us in our business has been, I mean, just being quite honest, shifting when the Lord says to shift, regardless of what it is. So whether it's starting the podcast, which was out of our comfort zones, or it was moving out of this space we put a bunch of work into, and it was beautiful, and it carried kind of a really great vibe, any of those kinds of things. It's like shifts are not easy, and it I think it's character building a lot of times, especially when you have to navigate it with somebody else without trampling on one another.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Henry, what's like, so you were asking us about like favorite and most challenging in just maybe just your high school time. What's like something you look at as like, wow, I really liked that? And what would
Jujitsu for
be
sure. Jujitsu for sure, because it was the first thing I ever really put all of myself into. It was the only thing. It was like for a long time, it was the only thing that I had 100% of my effort and focus on. It was just really clear as what I needed to do. You know what I mean? So that was really interesting. It was an interesting experience. That was by far probably the best. Getting off really late at night and like driving home after going to a good session, and you're the only one on the road, but you're like listening to music and having a good time because you just beat someone up. It's kind of, I mean, it's interesting. It's something I've never really experienced other than that. But in the same vein, one of the hardest parts was like my sophomore year. I took it really far, and I lost too much weight. I was starting to have a really bad self-image. School was getting really difficult, and so I found it really difficult to balance everything. And I started to just kind of fall back because in my head it was like, well, jujitsu is the most important because of the loss that I had a couple years before, and so it was like everything else can go by the wayside. But now I'm still kind of picking those pieces up from then. You know what I mean? It's still a long-reaching, long-lasting impact that it's had on me. But I think that by far those are best. The best and the worst has come from jujitsu for sure.
Yeah.
What helped you shift, like when you found yourself in the worst of those times and you kind of realized these things? What was it that helped you start getting out of that?
I don't really remember I think it was the summer, if I can be honest with you, because it was leading into summer when I was starting to get fairly bad. Like I wasn't ever like bad mentally. It was just like I got too focused on it and kind of let my health and academic health go to the wayside, I guess. But summer came and it gave me a really good break. I started to kind of just focus on other things that I really loved, like fishing, hanging out with family. It helped me rebalance myself, if I can just say that. And then going into like my junior year, it was like, okay, it's okay to take breaks every once in a while. You don't have to do this every day, no matter what. It's okay to eat a slice of pizza now and then. You know what I mean? Like it just became a lot more relaxed. I found the balance to be easier. And I found it to be more enjoyable when I did that too, because I really wanted to go to jujitsu as opposed to, I feel like I have to, because if I don't, I'm going to lose and get fat again. You know what I mean? Like that was my subconscious kind of just saying that, you know what I mean? So I think it was really important to have that break. And it really showed me how much rest can be important in someone's life. Like you need to have as much recovery as you do actually working at it. You know what I mean? So I think that was a really big lesson that it taught me. Really big.
Do you think it added confidence for you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think it most definitely did, because it allowed me to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. I was so focused on going to jujitsu every day and pounding it in that like I couldn't really look back and see the progress I had. I mean, I lost like 40 pounds and I got like my blue belt last year, you know what I mean? Or not last year, last summer rather. And so taking those breaks really let me look back and kind of, this sounds terrible, but compare myself to my peers and be like, okay, I'm doing okay compared to everybody else. I'm doing all right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting ahead. I'm doing okay. It's okay to have these breaks. You know what I mean? You don't have to keep going at it all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It definitely gave me some perspective for sure.
I was just curious about that because like a couple weeks ago, Bree and I were visiting her family, and her nephew, maybe a year ago, started Taekwondo, and he was like dealing with some bullying at school and things like that. And he started this, and if nothing else, it gave him like confidence in himself. Like he started to learn his body, he started to learn discipline, and not that he was taking it back to school and beating up the bullies, but it was almost like the bullies didn't have the same impact because he was more confident in who he was. And so I just didn't know if like any of that resonated.
That's a
like,
perfect
did you
way to
feel
put
that?
it. That's exactly how I felt. Yeah, that's perfect. Exactly how I would put it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Kim, you have any final thoughts as we close this interview with your one and only son?
With my sweet baby boy. He's going to love that. It's going to be recorded on the internet forever.
Oh, I don't care. Doesn't matter to me.
No, I appreciate you being on and being open to a conversation.
Yeah.
He really does make me proud every day. He's a free thinker. He is wildly intelligent. He has a kind heart. He is a good human.
Gonna make me cry on this podcast. Don't do it. No, I'm joking.
No, I just appreciate you, Henry.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you a whole bunch too. I don't say it enough. Don't say it enough. I do.
It's amazing. Henry, it was a pleasure and an honor to have you on today.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
This was fun. This wasn't planned. It was totally unexpected. We just hopped on and Kim's like, hey, you want to interview Henry today?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of great, huh? Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was good. It was good to talk to you guys. I really enjoyed it.
I love it.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for being here.
Of course.
And listeners, we'll see you soon.
See you next time.
Yep. See ya.
Thank you for sticking around. Listen for new episodes every Monday and Thursday. Find us on all social media platforms by searching for Market Mystics. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. Visit upperroomcd.com where you can find more information about the hosts, projects, and guests. Go deeper by booking a coaching appointment focused on redefining identity and wealth in your life. See you next time.